What is going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Yami Noob. It is your boy, Casual Dude, here back at it once again. Today, we are talking about the top 7 best classic styled motorcycles for beginners. Now, you might think that's a super niche segment, but I do get a lot of comments and questions for people who want more stylish or neo-retro or just plain old retro vintage bikes because they want to start riding. Maybe you saw some dude in your favorite movie wearing the cool leather gloves and the half helmet and this and that, and you just want to, I don't know, look like Ryan Gosling or something like that. I think that's a perfectly good goal. Ryan Gosling's a decent dude. I met him. We've shared drinks together. He's a wonderful man. He let me hold his pinky while he took me back to his place. Just kidding, none of that happened. Anyways, in case you live under a rock, these are all of our giveaway bikes, by the way. I am just fully flexing on this video. Check out all these bikes. We're giving them for free. Hit the link down below on yaminew.co and go and check it out. Let's get into this. Okay, so the field is super crowded nowadays for these like neo-retro or just plain old retro styled motorcycles. They're very, very crowded, very, very popular, and I think a lot of people like them, and for good reason. They have the kind of vintage flair and the old school looks, but without any of the headaches of owning a classic bike, which can be a bit of a handful. If you don't know, I myself do own a vintage styled motorcycle. I've got a Ducati Scrambler Desert Sled. That is Ducati's lovable retro themed bike, but it's all ADV style. It's got long travel suspension. So without further ado, let's look at number 1, and that is of course the Yamaha XSR 700. The Yamaha XSR 700, in my opinion, is one of the best when it comes to this retro styled motorcycle craze. And that's because through and through, it's an MT-07, right? It's a fantastic sport bike that just happens to be dressed up a little bit like a retro motorcycle. So it features that same 687cc parallel twin that we all know and love, makes about 75 horsepower, only weighs about 410, 415 pounds. So it's lightweight, easy to manage. It's gonna run every time you start it because it's basically an MT-07, but it just happens to look a little bit cooler. So I think the XSR 700 is a great starting point if you want to get into that classic style motorcycle thing. We actually gave away one of these last season for a giveaway, so I've got tons of videos on the XSR 700. I've got first ride impressions on it, I've got reviews on it, all kinds of stuff. We put an exhaust on it. Really, really cool bike. It's definitely one of my favorite motorcycles to recommend to people who are just getting into the hobby, into the lifestyle, and they want a retro classic styled bike. But let's look at number 2. So number 2 is a motorcycle that I see a lot in the comments section, and I have not really talked about it too much because I think there's a better option. I'll talk about it later in this video, but it is the Kawasaki W800. That is a great motorcycle, and it is really beloved by the international community. I know that there's tons of guys in Australia, the UK, and France, and all kinds of other places that love the W800, and that's for good reason. It's basically a retro-styled Bonneville, but that'll just work every time. In recent years, the Bonneville has become a better motorcycle, but back a couple years ago, a couple decades ago, let's say, the Bonneville had its teething problems, and the W800 was there as the tried and true parallel twin alternative. So what does this motorcycle feature? It features a 773cc parallel twin air-cooled engine, super classic and retro styling. It absolutely looks the part. I think, in my opinion, over the XSR 700 really, really nails that retro classic kind of thing. It looks absolutely like a vintage bike, which is what you want if you're in the style. Because although the XSR 700 does look more like a retro bike, the W800 actually looks like a vintage bike. So if you're trying to chase that aesthetic, the W800 is a great option. Now, it's not as powerful as the XSR 700 is, and it definitely won't just wheelie in second gear like that bike will. It's much more of a relaxed and toned down kind of ride. But if that's what you're looking for, you really can't go wrong with the W800. Now, it is a little bit more heavy than something like the XSR 700, so you will have to keep that in mind if you're gonna go for the W800. It does weigh about 500 pounds. If it is your first motorcycle, it might be a little bit heavier to pick up if you do end up dropping it, but still a really, really great option for those of you looking for that classic cafe retro kind of thing. Number 3 on today's list, and I would be remiss to not mention it, is the Ducati Scrambler Icon. I think the Ducati Scrambler Icon with its 803cc air-cooled 2-valve Ducati L-twin engine is one of the best bikes on the market right now, bar none. It's super playful, super fun, makes a great sound, looks awesome, and it has tons of aftermarket support, all kinds of stuff you can do to it. People have done all kinds of cool things with their scramblers. It's a really, really fun and just great motorcycle to get into. With about 75 horsepower and not that much torque, it is a bit of a torquey bike, relatively lightweight at about 417 pounds, wet and ready to ride. It's a great starting point for anyone who is a little bit more mature and looking to get into that retro classic kind of thing. I myself, like I said, I own the Desert Sled version of the Ducati Scrambler, and basically it's got the same 803cc engine, but it's just kind of beefed up and jacked up and just made to be more of an adventure off-roady kind of bike. I absolutely love my Desert Sled. If you want, I made a video doing a whole detailed 1-year review on that motorcycle. I've got tons of video about it on my channel. It's a really, really awesome bike. The Scrambler is going to come in at $9,595 on the showroom floor, so it is a little bit more expensive than some of the other options on this list. And the problem is, it doesn't really end there. The Ducati tax is a real thing, and because it has desmodromic valves and all kinds of other weird, finicky things about it, you were probably going to spend a little bit more long-term with this machine. But don't let that dissuade you. That's not to say that it's super expensive to run long-term, but it's just going to be a little bit more expensive than something like the XSR. The other thing I want to point out too is if you're looking to get this for your first motorcycle, definitely stick with the Icon range, the 803cc range. You can also go for the 62 range if you're not super comfortable with the 800. You can get the smaller engine, but I would definitely stay away from the bigger full throttle versions with the 1100s or the Desert Sled as well, because it is a bigger motorcycle. I think the Icon and the street-oriented scramblers with the 803cc is very beginner appropriate, and you will like them a whole lot. Let's look at number 4 on today's list. So number 4 on today's list is, of course, the Triumph Bonneville T100. I mentioned the Bonneville earlier in this list, and you kind of knew it had to make an appearance on this list. The Bonneville is just the absolute gold standard when it comes to retro-styled motorcycles that have modern amenities and features. So what makes it so great? Well, it's the Bonneville. It is the absolute classic, iconic, retro standard motorcycle. Everyone knows what a Bonnie is. You're gonna get lots of comments on it if you pull up to a gas station. Some boomer's gonna come up to you and tell you how he used to have one back in the 60s or something. They're very well loved, and they have a whole lot of character and charm. So the T100, the brand new ones, are gonna come in probably at the more expensive end on this list as well, about $10,500 showroom for them. But they come with a 900cc engine, making 55 horsepower and 59 foot-pounds of torque. That makes it an awesome motorcycle to have around town. Really torquey and fun and easy to ride kind of bike. Much like the W800 it is a little bit heavier than I would personally recommend for a beginner rider. It comes in at about 500 pounds as well, but totally manageable around town and stuff, because it tends to feel a little bit lighter when you're actually rolling and moving with it on the road. It's a really, really awesome bike. There's a reason Bonnevilles sell super well and they're so beloved. And these new ones that they're making that are fuel injected, modern amenities, a modern engine, and a chassis and a frame that looks kind of older and retro is pretty hard to beat. The Bonnies are a really, really cool bike. They also make an awesome sound. So number 5 on today's list of classic styled motorcycles for beginner riders is gonna be the Yamaha Bolt. Now, some of you might start lambasting me and saying that the Harley-Davidson Sportster or some other cruiser is better than the Bolt, but I firmly believe that the Bolt, with its features, with its engine, and its price point, is the best option for beginner riders. Now, why is that? So the Bolt's gonna come in at $8,000 on the showroom floor. That is cheaper than the Harley-Davidson 883 Sportster and a lot cheaper than the 1200 Sportster they're gonna offer you as well. It's got a lot more character and charm than something like a Vulcan or a Rebel. I think the Bolt really knocks it out of the park. It's got a 942cc V-twin, lots of torque, really, really fun engine, and it's just one of those motorcycles that I think makes a lot of sense for someone trying to get into that classic style market, but still wants that Japanese reliability, super ease of maintenance, and just a great motorcycle that's gonna start up and run every time. The cool thing about the Bolt too is, compared to the Rebels and the Vulcans and some of the other cruisers, is it actually has a V-twin. The Vulcans and the Rebels have these little anemic parallel twins. There's just not the same kind of feel and flavor as a V-twin. A cruiser deserves a V-twin, in my opinion, to truly make it stand out and truly make it actually be the real cruiser thing that you're looking for. So in my opinion, the Yamaha Bolt is gonna be the best classic styled cruiser for beginner riders. It's really approachable. You might think that 942 cc's is a big engine, but it's relatively heavyweight and it doesn't rev super hard. So it's got a lot of torque down low, but it's gonna be a very manageable motorcycle if it's your first one. Now, number 6 on today's list is kind of a funny one. It's the Honda Monkey. So I think the Honda Monkey actually makes a lot of sense if you're trying to get like a classic styled motorcycle, but you want one maybe as a second bike or something like that, or you want one to, you know, teach your kids how to ride, or maybe teach your wife how to ride, or teach anybody you want how to ride. The Monkey is a great motorcycle, and it just looks really cool. Basically, it's a Grom and Boomer cosplay. I feel pretty comfortable in saying that because basically what Honda did here was they took the Grom and just kind of dressed it up a little bit and sold them by the absolute bucket loads to Boomers. But the reason that's good for you is that you get a classic styled motorcycle that still has the same underpinnings of a very modern bike. So it features that 125cc little air-cooled engine from the Grom, super easygoing, basically unkillable motorcycle, will just run forever. You literally cannot destroy these things. They work super, super well. The Honda Monkey is an awesome bike. I think the only point that detracts from the Monkey, in my opinion, is that it's a little bit expensive for what it is. I think it's about $4,000 on the showroom floor. And that, to me, is asking a whole lot for a mini bike. It's not even a real motorcycle that can actually go on the highway or do it on big trips or anything like that, even though famously Zach Kortz and Ari Henning took their little monkeys across a Baja desert. But something tells me you're not quite as insane as those guys, and you're probably not gonna do that with your Monkey. So that, to me, tells me of a motorcycle that is not really super appropriate to keep, you know, long term, or to keep, you know, on a highway or something like that. So the Monkey, to me, fits a very niche audience, and that's what's kind of hampering it for me. But if you want a classic styled mini bike, the Honda Monkey is the way to go. But the last one on today's list is a sleeper hit, and I think is better than the Monkey and better than almost any other bike on this list too. So number 7 on today's list of classic styled motorcycles that I think you should check out as a beginner rider is the humble Yamaha TW250. Now you might look at this thing and say, Yami, come on, this isn't a classic styled motorcycle, but in fact, because Yamaha has not updated it since the 80s, it is now certified retro and certified vintage. So the TW250 is this awesome big wheeled dual sport kind of farm bike thing. It's an awesome motorcycle that will just do anything you ask of it. It features a 250cc air-cooled engine, literally unkillable motorcycle, absolutely bulletproof. The TW250 is an awesome bike. You can literally trundle over anything with this thing. It'll just kind of roll over whatever you want it to. If you live in a more rural area, or if you live in a place that has lots of trails and forests and that kind of stuff, the TW250 is going to be a blast to own. And the cool part about the TW250 is that you can still take it out and use it as a regular motorcycle. It's got a little bit more legs and balls than something like the Honda Monkey, and it's a really, really cool motorcycle in my opinion. I think the TW250 is really a kind of a sleeper hit. I would personally recommend something like the WR250 over the TW250, but for today's list, we're looking at stuff that's more classically styled, and the WR250 looks a little bit more modern. So I think the TW250 is a super cool bike, and you're gonna have a ton of fun with that thing. Hey, thanks for watching the video. Why don't you click this one right over here and you can keep watching some more of your sweet Papa Yam. Maybe this one will have fun memes in it. Maybe it'll be interesting. Maybe I crash a motorcycle. Who can say? Maybe you should click and find out.